I'll hold the mic.
It's such a wonderful opportunity to see all of these people whom I haven't seen, some of them for many years, and it's really a great pleasure for me. And it's also an enormous shock to me to realize that this day finally actually arrived and I'm still here. And I thought, since the first 15 years of my life didn't amount to much that I can remember, my early adulthood was highlighted by my great love for President Roosevelt and the fact that I really wanted to be in my father's factory. And I knew I loved that factory too. But he said to me, I can't hire you, you're a girl. Aren't you lucky, Bert? So Bert Paley, my brother-in-law, who's a lot younger than I, got the job, and I was really very mad. My father really would like more for me to get married and have a family, which I did, and that wasn't so bad either. But it was during war times that I met Cass. Some of you will remember, and many of you won't, that this was a period of time when everybody was expected very little in the future, and all of the men were in uniform and very few of the women, and you just made do. And I met Cass, and we had a wonderful relationship, and we set a date to get married. And at the same time that we set a date, my cousin had a fiance who was going to have 4 days leave at the same time that our wedding was going to take place. So we had 2 separate ceremonies and a raucous wedding like you never would imagine. And off to the Frontenac Hotel. And I was the great skier, and Cass gamely went along. And at the end of 2 weeks, he was the poster boy for good skiers, and I fell down all the time. So I discovered that it was the best thing not to compete with him as far as athletics was concerned. And I did sail with him a lot for 2 reasons. One is that no one else would go with him as time went on. The other, we had different wishes for sailing, one of which he liked to go out, and I loved to come in. This was that part of it, but in any event, after our honeymoon, which was 2 weeks of questionable, well, we were not exactly on the even part.
We don't want to.
I'm not going to tell you the details
Oh,
of
you
that,
can say it.
except that my father and mother met us at the train station, and you have to know that this was January of 1944. And my father said to me, he was jumping up and down, he was so excited, and he said, I bought you a house. He bought us a house. We're married for 2 weeks, we're going off into the service in 2 days. Cass was going to a submarine base, and we didn't have a clue as to what our life was going to be like in the immediate future, if any future at all. And he came and took us to this place, which was the most beautiful one-family house. He showed us this room, and he said, this is going to be Cass's office, and this is going to be a waiting room, and that's going to be another doctor, and we're going to rent the second floor to a doctor, and you're going to live on the 2 top floors. I said, no, I want to live on the second floor. It's a very important decision. Is this on?
It is.
It's a very important decision at that point. I don't hear it now. A very important decision at that point in life. And so 63 years later, I'm still living in the same 34th floor. So I don't know whether Father knows best, but he certainly did. And so Cass, after we got out of the service, Cass opened up his office, and another doctor had that front, a wonderful man, and he had a nurse. Well, she was a nurse, and she had a little stripe on her cap, and her name was Miss Clements, and she's here now as Mrs. Wolf. Which is very nice. And our wedding, I forgot to mention that 2 of the people who were there are here now, and they're my cousins Brammy and Sookie, and I thought that was always nice.
Margie was there too.
Yeah, she was there. She was the flower. Margie was the flower girl. And time went on, and Deal went to something called the Back Bay Nursery School. And that was in what is now the lagoon on Starrow Drive. And we heard about this road that was going to go along Starrow Park. And I happened to be the chairman of the mothers at that point. And that was that part of it. And I guess I got a little involved in local affairs as time went on. And one night, my doorbell rang, and these two lovely young men came. And one's name was Kevin White, one's name was Herb Gleason, who was here tonight. And they asked me if I would be interested in joining the Ward 5 Democratic Committee slate. I didn't know what the Ward 5 Democratic Committee was, but I lived in Precinct 10, which made me very valuable since they had nobody else in Precinct 10. And Kevin won, we won, and then Kevin ran for Secretary of State. And we were then in a very terrible time in Boston because there was the problem of busing. And there was not only the problem of busing, but there was also Louise Day Hicks. And there was a great deal of racial antagonism in the city. And she was going to run on the campaign slogan, "You know where I stand." And she was a really tough South Boston type. And so it frightened me because I really thought we were going to have terrible racial incidents in the city. And I called Herb one day and I said, what would it be like if we asked Kevin to run for mayor? Because Kevin was not only very talented, but he also had a father who had been on the Boston City Council, and his father-in-law was Mother Galvin, whom I think was the head of the Charlestown political axis there, and then he lived on Beacon Hill, and I thought maybe he could win. And so we had a party and invited everybody that we knew who was political, and we asked him to run for mayor, and at first he was kind of surprised. I think he had other plans, but Herb called me the next day and said, I think you're going to get your wish. And Kevin ran, and he won, and I had the most wonderful time as a result of that. I was on the Boston Rent Board, and we did things with the Parkman House and the new City Hall and Something, and did a lot of really interesting programs and projects that were better than any sociology major in the whole world, because we really understood the whole complexities of the city. So that was that part of it. And but almost everything happened as a result of living in the city and living here, where most people were moving out of Boston in those days. The people who were buying the property or moving in were these diploma mills, which were taking over the large single-family houses and turning them into multiple dwellings. And the place was full of kids playing, you remember that, Bill, playing in the streets. And it was really a very rundown place, and Kenmore Square was the toughest place you could imagine. And I was terribly concerned that it was going to be a real combat zone up here. So we spent a lot of our time in City Hall at hearings trying to fight the good fight, and it actually worked. And after those years, I won't go in anymore, I'll keep you standing, but we finally acquired Cohasset. But my claim to fame, I think, was remodeling everybody's house in the families. And had really a wonderful time. Louisa has. I did 3 for Louisa.
I do things in threes. And then Madeline, we did Madeline's building and several others, and all of a sudden it's now. And I can't believe that the years have passed, but in reviewing some of these things, I realized that it wasn't such a vacuum. And I really, except for the excruciating losses which I've had, I spent a wonderful life. So I hope everyone can duplicate that. And
Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Muriel.
Waiting for you to cut the cake. I want you to have a very good time talking to your friends. I want you to know that so far it's good. So far it's good. It is. It's fabulous.
All right. It's not necessary. Some people have
Henry or Jenny, you've always been really a beacon of clarity. We think you're crazy, but you're really not. And I have been blessed to have you as my mother and to continue to have you as my mother, as irritated as I sometimes sound. You really are remarkable. You're a lot to live up to. It's a little intimidating, and I respect and honor you, and I probably don't say that often enough. And I think how completely blessed I have been. And I think I speak for everybody in this room and when I say you are just a remarkable human being. And another 90 years. For a second. But when I went to get the paper today and I said, I want something festive, it's my mother's 90th birthday. And the woman at the store said to me, oh, will she even know? She said it was a very nice bathrobe she was wearing. People wouldn't have even known. This is very special for you, Mom. You'll have to show us. And she will. This is good paper. This is a special flashing tiara. And Michael, it only said 60 in the store, and Michael made it a 9. How did he do that?
Pass this down from one generation to another.
Well, here I am. I just want to say, I just want to be short, because of course, I am short. And I want to say something about my auntie, right? We only had one auntie. I had other aunts, and I just thought, I didn't think the evening could go further, very much long, without mentioning of, the most important person in the story. A number of years ago, I went to Cincinnati, and I had a conversation with Bill Clinton. This was a very big moment for me. I was very proud of this. I called up my family. I said, today I met Bill Clinton. My aunt then said, I saw him tonight. Did you like his tie? I liked it. Was he still wearing the gray suit? This is a woman that knows detail. Bill Clinton detail. Now, I just want one thing. Slower. You know, my Nana always says, watch the televangelists. They speak nice and slowly. And I said, they're Christians. She said, I like the way they speak. I send them money. I said, don't do that. So anyways, this should set some kind of context for this moment. When I was growing up, every single Sunday, winter, spring, summer, and fall, my siblings, Nancy, Richard, and much later, Marianne, and my cousins, Deal, Madeline, and Louisa, always would go to see Nan and Harry every Sunday. Many people would have thought that this was an onerous task. In fact, later on, I found out that Auntie and my parents thought this was an onerous task. Fortunately, we didn't know that as kids. Or we might have found it an onerous task. And we would sit around the dining room table, and then there would be a little annex where the kids would sit. In the kids' room, I would sit, Nancy, Richie, and Louisa, and then Louisa and Harry, my grandfather, would throw napkins at each other. This is kind of a raucous affair, right? Then my uncle, Uncle Cass, would sit on the other side, and when we would sit at the grown-up table, when we would have the 340 desserts that my grandmother would put out, and my uncle would be wise just before we would do the ritual, go watch football on the Sunday afternoon. But if I'm honest, in my youth, the star of that Sunday was my aunt. My aunt was a Democrat. And she was a liberal. And she had a lot to say about it. And it was the 60s. And if there's anybody that was at the 60s before the 60s, it was my aunt. And if you remember the 60s, you don't really remember the 60s. If you remember the 60s, it was a wild and crazy time. And of all the people that I would talk about in the 60s, with their vision and their understanding and their conceptions and their social values and their social justice, it was my aunt. And if I have to think of anybody that gave us our real values, my mother and father, my father was on the town hall committee, took care of the dump. My mother...
And the incinerator.
And the incinerator, that's what it is. My mother was an environmentalist before there were environmentalists. But my aunt gave us values and vision, a sense of social conscience, and ways of thinking and challenging that will last me my whole life, and all of my cousins and my siblings. And for that, I am in your great debt. The fact that she was a bit of a worry and she wanted me to go to Deerfield Academy, that hotbed of rabbinic education. And still regrets that I didn't go to Deerfield Academy.
Michael.
Was just, a sidelight. But the Democrats, we're all Democrats. And I know that my aunt will live to 120, and if anybody slips back, she will come and yell at us.
Well, I don't know if everybody knows this, but all of Muriel's grandsons have been tenants in this building. So I actually wrote her a song, and I don't know, my wife knows this, I don't know how many other people know this. I always called her the super, because stuff was always breaking down in that deadbeat apartment. But the song I chose was kind of short, so I couldn't address certain things like the fact that every grandchild has got to have a solid stock of Canadian Club at their apartment. And dinner ready and on the table without an announcement. And also, different things about Muriel, like her love for Costco. Which I did address, but I didn't address the fact that she bought a huge pergola at Costco, which is probably the largest thing they've sold. Except maybe cars and houses.
What's a pergola?
A pergola is...
It's
It's a big word, and I don't know what it means.
It's like a gazebo.
So, it's a gazebo. So the song I picked to write new words to was To Sir With Love, which I changed to Super With Love. But I don't know the song. So I'll just start from the beginning without being able to sing. Our tenant days of dinner, in and chauffeuring, you are gone. But in my mind, I don't know the word. I know they will still live on and on. But how do you thank someone who's taken you from Cohasset to Costco? It isn't easy, but I'll try. Now here's what I know the part. If you wanted the sky, your car's exhaust could write in smoky lead. And she's an environmentalist. That would soar 1,000 feet high to super with love. The time has come for looking back and saluting 90 years of fun. And as we leave, we know there'll be many more to come. We are glad your Mercedes works to shepherd you from Boston to the burbs. The noisy engine is superb. If you wanted more of your Kirkland signature oatmeal cookies, I would put them in the mail and address these to Super With Love.
Oh, thank you.
I'm Katie, her oldest granddaughter, and the best. That's my drunk sister. But I do claim credit for one important thing that I think I've brought to Muriel's life, which is her nickname. And I do believe that I was the one who came up with it. So, that was where my creativity ended at age, I don't know, 2. But I coined Mio because I could not say Muriel, and it has stuck for most of us in the family since. And now, of course, just to add insult to injury, I call her only Muriel. So that's, but I always think of her as Mio. I think, the couple of things that I wanted to say about my grandmother are that she's somebody who, as most of us know, was probably born about 2.5 generations early for her time. And, I can only imagine what countries she would be presiding over today if she were born when I was born. And would put me completely to shame. My sister's trying to get brownie points right now. But, just her incredible drive and her inspiring way that she carries herself and her clarity of vision is something that is an incredible model to try to follow. As my mom said, she's an incredibly tough act to follow. And I can only hope that I have so many wonderful experiences and people who care about me at this point in my life as she does now. And we're just so lucky to have her in our lives. And she's been an amazing inspiration for me in my life and my career. And a source of constant amusement. The driving in the bathrobe is kind of the one side of the stories. The amazing kitchen that she keeps is another, and some of you may be familiar with that. We won't go into too much detail, but let's just say that my sister did once discover a 3 or 4 month old Thanksgiving turkey carcass melting on top of the refrigerator in Cohasset. Luckily, she had stopped eating it at least a month before that. So, but just so any of you who may visit future times, it was the caterer's fault. It was the caterer's. For future visits to my grandmother's abode, just know that you should bring your own everything. And other than bourbon, which she serves very well, you may not want to eat anything. But while she's not a great cook, she is an incredible joy and just huge force in all of our lives. I cannot even imagine what it would be like if she were not here. And the fact that I now live halfway across the country, I feel that sort of void in my life on a daily basis more than I could possibly have imagined. And truthfully, I miss her more in terms of these great experiences than probably the rest of you guys combined, no offense. But I think it's just because every moment with her is just so entertaining and so engaging, and I'm just so glad to be here. So Mio, thanks.
Thank you, Katie. I know about your kids.
Because it's just really not my style. But to my grandmother on her 90th birthday, I took her to the RCA about 3 weeks ago, and I break into tears about it. Every time I talk about it, I'm about to do it right now. For a woman who's been involved in everything in Boston, who's been an architect, an artist, and a huge force, I brought her to a contemporary art museum, and she said to me, I've been asleep for 30 years. I can't believe this is what people are doing now. And to be 90 years old and living in the same place and still be astounded by Boston and still be astounded by contemporary art and to be influenced and to be able to be creative enough to change her mind and look at things in a new way, I'll never be able to live up to what you've done. Happy birthday.
Thanks, Abby.
My true colors are now showing. I'm Nick. I'm the first grandson who Carter might have been alluding to.
The best.
But, well, yeah, the best. But anyways, but now, I have a son who's the first great-grandson, and so I've been supplanted. But anyways, he's not here tonight because he's only 3 and he doesn't do so well after 8 p.m. Although he was invited against the parents' decision. Anyways. But Muriel, I do want to say that you're definitely the rock that this whole family is founded on. If I start choking so much that you can't understand anything I say, just let me know. Because there's a big, pop, pop, pop sound. Anyways, but Muriel, you really are the rock that this whole family is founded on. And, even though as a pediatrician I might guffaw at you for saying that David not wearing a coat in the winter is going to be the cause of his pneumonia, because we all know the main cause of pneumonia is not wearing a coat. Inside. But, a lot of the stuff you do have to say really is founded in reason and thought and caring. And that's the most important thing. And we all love you.
Thank you. I always love you.
All right, now it's time for my speech. It's time to cut the cake. Anyone in this room knows exactly how sharp she is. I just want to say about 3 weeks ago, I got a letter from my grandmother, and I didn't know whether it was going to be scolding me for letting Nick not put a coat on his son, or scolding me for not getting my applications to law school in, or who knows what I was being scolded for. So I waited about a week and a half before I opened it. And then I finally opened the letter, and it was a form about getting my abandoned property. I'm sure you've heard on the radio or read in the newspaper about abandoned property. And my grandmother was so on top of it that she was sending me my form to claim my abandoned property. So now I haven't received my abandoned property yet because I waited a week and a half before I sent in a form. But I just wanted to say how amazing it is, to be in her presence. She's an inspiration to, I think, everyone she's ever met. How well she runs not only her own life, but also tries to run everyone's life.
not the most wonderful thing in the world. I think I'm a nag for good, and my analysis about it with reference to my grandchildren, I was slightly more circumspect with my own children. But the truth of the matter they can't divorce me. She's nothing. I appreciate the love that's
My Aunt Muriel once told my parents that she should raise me because she'd do it better.
She was right. But for good.
There's lots to say, especially happy birthday on this wonderful day. It took me a while to coalesce my act, a poem for my sister and one with tact. I've known you the longest from my very first day. Later you taught me to outline. What more can I say? Mother, sailor, facilitator, warrior about everything including the elevator. Independent, entertaining, political pundit. Ideas extraordinaire and how to fund it. We are different and the same with Cohen for a middle name. People kept asking, what could Muriel use? I knew exactly, but you'd blow a fuse. A new car would be great. But what a shame to not hear you coming. It wouldn't be the same. So settle for good wishes and love galore, and on to next year and maybe more.
you'll never get it over.
Go into your 90s.
It'll all burn down before it gets last.